When Margaret passed away 3 years ago, I didn't just lose my wife of 42 years. I lost my best friend, my travel companion, and the person who made sure I didn't eat cereal for dinner every night. For those first few months, my kitchen became this strange museum. Her cookbook sat untouched. That fancy stand mixer we got for our anniversary gathered dust. And me. I ate the same 3 meals on rotation. A sandwich for lunch. Microwaved frozen dinners at night. And cereal not just for dinner anymore, but sometimes breakfast and lunch too. Why bother cooking elaborate meals when it's just me? What was the point? You know, nobody really prepares you for how lonely a kitchen table can feel. After decades of Margaret asking about my day while we chopped vegetables together, the silence was deafening. Our dining routine had been the backbone of our marriage: Sunday pot roasts, Friday night homemade pizzas, and Margaret's famous lasagna on birthdays. But suddenly, cooking seemed pointless. Why dirty all those dishes? Why spend an hour preparing something that would be eaten in 10 minutes with only the evening news as company? My daughter Jenny would visit and open my fridge, looking increasingly concerned. "Dad, you can't just eat the same things every day," she'd say. And I'd give her that stubborn look that drove Margaret crazy for 4 decades and tell her, "Actually, I can." It's efficient. What I didn't tell her was that trying new recipes just reminded me that Margaret wasn't there to enjoy them. The truth is, I wasn't just eating the same meals because it was convenient. I was avoiding the kitchen because it hurt too much to be there without her. 6 months into my rotation of sandwiches and microwave dinners, I had my annual physical. Dr. Richards, I've been seeing him for nearly 20 years now, looked at my blood work and didn't sugarcoat it. "Frank, your nutrition is suffering. Your vitamin levels are low, your cholesterol is creeping up, and you've lost muscle mass." I tried to joke it off. "Well, at least I've lost something," he didn't laugh. Instead, he said something that stuck with me: "Margaret wouldn't want this for you." He was right, of course. Margaret had always been the one pushing vegetables onto my plate, making sure I took care of myself. In some strange way, by neglecting my health, I was also letting go of a part of her legacy. That evening, I found myself standing in front of the refrigerator longer than usual, staring at the same old sandwich fixings, the same carton of milk, the same everything. I closed the door without taking anything out. Then I did something I hadn't done in months. I opened her recipe box. The recipe box was this old wooden thing, hand-painted by her mother. Inside were hundreds of index cards, some yellowed with age, others splattered with sauce stains, physical evidence of meals enjoyed, of a life well lived. I pulled out her simple tomato soup recipe. Nothing fancy, just something she'd make on rainy days. I'll be honest with you, I almost put it back. What was the point of making a whole pot of soup just for me? But something made me hold onto that card. Maybe it was Dr. Richard's words, or maybe it was just that I could almost hear Margaret telling me to just try it, Frank, so I did. I made the soup. It wasn't perfect, I burned the garlic a little, and I definitely added too much salt. But as I sat down with that bowl of imperfect soup, something shifted. The kitchen didn't feel quite so empty. And for the first time in months, I wasn't eating something from a package. That night, I divided the rest of the soup into containers and froze them. It was my first lesson in cooking for one: make a full recipe. Enjoy it once, then save the rest for later. Margaret would have been proud of my practicality. Once I started cooking again, I faced a new challenge: grocery shopping for one person. Have you ever tried to buy just enough produce for one person without half of it going bad? It's like some kind of impossible math problem. The first time I went shopping with actual recipes in mind, I came home with way too much of everything. By the end of the week, I was throwing out slimy lettuce and fuzzy berries, feeling guilty about the waste. Margaret had always been so careful about using everything we bought. I started keeping a notebook, something else Margaret used to do, tracking what I actually used versus what went bad. I learned that those pre-packaged salad mixes were never a good idea for me. I'd eat one serving and forget about the rest, until it turned into some science experiment in the back of my fridge. Instead, I started buying just a few versatile vegetables that could work in multiple meals. A bell pepper could go into an omelet, a stir-fry, or get stuffed for dinner. Spinach could be a salad one day and wilted into pasta the next. I became friends with the butcher at my local grocery store, who was happy to sell me just one chicken breast or a single pork chop instead of the family packs. I also discovered the beauty of frozen vegetables, something Margaret had always turned her nose up at. But for a solo cook, they're perfect. I use what I need and keep the rest for another day, no waste. Would Margaret approve? Maybe not of the frozen green beans, but she'd appreciate the practicality. Even with my new shopping habits, I still found myself falling into routines. Different routines than before, but routines nonetheless. I'd make chicken on Mondays, fish on Wednesdays, and pasta on Fridays. It was better than cereal for dinner, but I was still missing something. I remembered how Margaret would flip through cooking magazines on Sunday mornings, marking recipes she wanted to try. She loved experimenting in the kitchen. "Food should be an adventure, Frank," she'd say when I complained about some exotic ingredient she'd brought home. So I decided to challenge myself, one new recipe every week. Nothing too fancy, I'm still a practical Midwestern man at heart, but something I hadn't made before. My first attempt was a disaster, a curry that called for spices I'd never heard of. I substituted what I thought made sense and ended up with something that tasted nothing like curry and everything like confused paprika. I almost gave up right then. But the next week I tried again. A simple roasted chicken with herbs. As the smell filled my kitchen, I found myself getting excited about dinner for the first time in months. The chicken was delicious, and I used the leftovers for sandwiches and soup throughout the week. This became my new strategy. One slightly more complex project recipe on weekends when I had more time, and then creative ways to use the leftovers during the week. Suddenly, I wasn't eating the same thing every day, but I also wasn't spending hours in the kitchen for a meal that would be gone in minutes. One of the hardest parts about dining alone isn't the cooking, it's the eating. Meals had always been social events in our house. Even when the kids moved out, Margaret and I would talk about our days, discuss the news, or plan our next trip. Eating in silence felt wrong somehow. At first, I tried having the TV on for company, but it wasn't the same. Then one evening, on a whim, I called my old friend Bill while I was eating dinner. Bill's wife had passed a few years before Margaret, so he understood. We ended up talking for an hour, and for the first time, the meal wasn't just about sustenance, it had that social element I'd been missing. This gave me an idea. I started inviting friends over for dinner once a month. Nothing fancy, usually that weekend project recipe I'd been experimenting with. The first time was terrifying. What if they hated my cooking? What if there was nothing to talk about? But it turned out that people were just happy to be invited to connect. My neighbor Ruth brought desserts. My old work colleague Tom brought wines. And there we were, a table of mostly widowed or divorced seniors, laughing and talking like we were in our 30s again. What? On the nights I dined alone, I found other ways to make meals special. Sometimes I'd set the table properly, with a placemat and cloth napkin like Margaret always insisted on. Other times I'd eat on the porch and watch the sunset. I started a habit of writing down one good thing that happened that day while I ate dinner, a practice that made meals more mindful and less lonely. One practical challenge of cooking for one is that most recipes serve 4 or more. In the beginning, I tried mathematically reducing recipes, which led to absurdities like using 3/8 of an egg or half a garlic clove. I quickly abandoned that approach. Instead, I Learned to adapt recipes in ways that made sense. Some dishes like soups and stews, I'd make the full amount and freeze portions. Others like fresh fish or salads, I'd scale down to a single serving. I discovered that the simplest meals were often the most satisfying. A perfectly cooked piece of salmon with a squeeze of lemon. A baked potato topped with whatever vegetables needed using up. A good piece of bread with soft cheese and sliced tomatoes from my small garden, something Margaret had always maintained and that I'd taken over somewhat successfully. The beauty of cooking for one is that there's no one to please but yourself. If I want breakfast for dinner, I have breakfast for dinner. If I want to eat the same pasta 3 days in a row because I enjoy it, I do exactly that. There's a freedom in cooking for yourself that I never expected to find. As I became more comfortable in the kitchen, I found myself talking about cooking more. At the senior center where I volunteer, I'd swap recipes with other widows and widowers. We'd commiserate over the challenges of cooking small portions and share tricks we discovered. This led to something unexpected. I started a small cooking group. Once a month, 5 of us get together in someone's kitchen. We each bring ingredients for a dish, and we cook and eat together. It's chaotic and noisy and nothing like the quiet efficiency of cooking alone, and it's wonderful. Ruth, who rarely cooked after her husband died, found she enjoyed making desserts again when she had people to share them with. Tom, who had never cooked before his divorce, learned to make simple meals beyond the microwave. And me. I found myself looking forward to these gatherings more than almost anything else. The group has expanded beyond cooking. We've gone on field trips to farmers' markets, taken a knife skills class at the community college, and even started a small herb garden at the senior center. Food became the bridge that connected us, that gave us purpose and community. It's been 3 years since Margaret passed away. My kitchen is no longer a museum, it's a lived-in space again. Her cookbooks now have my notes in the margins alongside hers. That stand mixer gets used for more than just gathering dust. I won't pretend that I don't still have lonely meals. I do. There are still evenings when I look across the empty chair and feel the weight of her absence. But cooking has become more than just a necessity, it's become a way to take care of myself, to connect with others, and yes, even to feel close to Margaret again. When I make her tomato soup, I can almost hear her telling me to add more basil. When I try a new recipe, I imagine her reaction. She'd love the Thai-inspired stir-fry I've perfected, but she'd probably raise an eyebrow at my experimental pizza toppings. The most surprising thing I've discovered is that there can be joy in cooking for one. There's a quiet satisfaction in preparing a meal just for yourself, in saying through action that you're worth the effort. That even without someone across the table, a good meal matters. So if you're like I was, eating the same meals every day, wondering what the point is of cooking just for yourself, I hope you'll try something different. Start small. Maybe make that recipe your spouse used to love, or try something completely new that's just for you. Set the table properly, light a candle, put on some music. Food nourishes more than just our bodies. It connects us to memories, to others, and to ourselves. It took me too long to realize that cooking for one doesn't have to be a sad reminder of what I've lost. It can be an affirmation of what remains. These days, my refrigerator is full of variety, leftover curry, containers of homemade soup, fresh vegetables for tomorrow's stir-fry. I no longer eat the same meals every day, and my doctor is much happier with my blood work. More importantly, I think Margaret would be proud. If you're navigating solo dining, whether due to loss, divorce, or just life circumstances, I hope you'll join our community here. Share your own journey in the comments, try some of the recipes I'll link below, and remember, you're worth more than a bowl of cereal for dinner. Until next time, this is Frank from Solo Dining, reminding you that a table for one can still be a table of joy.